patriotism, faith, national unity, education, fiscal responsibility, civility, the values that define America. Fascinating stories and talks from America-loving patriots dedicated to preserving freedom, opportunity, and justice. Welcome to the Friends and Fellow Citizens podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the final 2020 episode of Friends and Fellow Citizens, episode 19. I'm your host, Sherman Tylowski. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in to this podcast. I really appreciate your support as we almost wrap up the holiday season with New Year's 2021 coming up. I thought I would take this moment to, first of all, thank all of our contributors for last week's holiday special. I'm really, really grateful for all the support that people have given me, and the feedback has been phenomenal. I think adding the Friends and Fellow Citizens community in my episodes is always a top priority for me. I'm always thinking about all of you, and you are the ones who keep this podcast going in so many ways, and I just can't begin to thank you all. I look forward to doing and trying new ways to incorporate our supporters, because that it really is a top priority. That's a top priority for me, and it will be for the entire duration of this podcast, well into the future. Now, today, I want to just share a few thoughts with you before we close out this year of 2020, and just an opportunity for me to share a few of my thoughts about the holiday season, just to add on to that incredible episode we did this past week. I'll first start with a story that I just read about. This article dates in 2018, December 2018, from CNN, and it's about a purchase of a very historic artifact. One that I didn't know about, and probably most people don't know about, but I think it's a symbol for what not only this podcast means, but really about the purpose of why we're here and why we celebrate the holidays, but also how we celebrate them amidst this difficult time for many. And it says here that this was taking place days before Christmas of 1863, right in the middle of the American Civil War. And President Lincoln knew that in a fractured nation, he had to do something to stand out. Now, a little bit of context, President Lincoln's wife was named Mary Todd, and her family came from essentially a very prominent slaveholding family based in Arkansas. And the Craig family were essentially cousins to Mary Todd, and this was particularly difficult, as you can imagine. You have a president who is calling for the union of a nation completely fractured by slavery. And President Lincoln had to deal with these very fraught relations within his family. A very challenging thing to do, not just for him, for a lot of people. And he decided to do something different. Despite the ongoing war that was happening, he got a message from the Craig family asking if they could return home for Christmas. Even as Union forces were taking over Arkansas, this family still wanted to be home to celebrate the holidays. And whether or not it was because of the conflict or for another reason, President Lincoln agreed to let the family settle peacefully back in their Arkansas plantation. And I'll read the letter to you here. Dated December 21st, 1863. Quote, Mr. and Mrs. Craig of Arkansas, whose plantation, situated upon the Mississippi River a few miles below Helena, has been desolated during the present war, propose returning to reoccupy and cultivate said plantation, and it is my wish that they be permitted to do so, and that the United States military forces in that vicinity will not molest them or allow them to be molested, as long as the said Mr. and Mrs. Craig shall demean themselves as peaceful, loyal citizens of the United States. End quote. It's a very simple letter, but I think the symbolic aspect is really what is so powerful about it. In such divisive times, President Lincoln showed that we can still extend goodwill to those who disagree with us on fundamental issues. It's about the individual who reaches out to spread seeds of goodness that's going to make change. And while it's a simple act and an act that we might not read about much in the history books or in the news, but I really want to bring attention to this. I just reading about it, knowing the challenges that President Lincoln had to face, it's extraordinary. I think that on the holiday side of things, President Lincoln also understood the importance of the holidays, of spending time with family. Even as divisions are still going on, the holidays, I think, remind us of this idea of traditional values that withstand the circumstances. One Christmas is not going to be exactly the same as another. We all have different Christmases. I've had Christmases where I've spent time with immediate family. There's been, there's some recent Christmases where it's been immediate family, and I've spent time with my family down in Florida. I miss them tremendously, by the way. I couldn't get a chance to go down there this year, but I'm really hoping to go next year. In 2016, just for cutting costs and for saving on some resources, I could not spend Christmas with my family in 2016. And I'll never forget that moment when calling my parents, wishing them Merry Christmas, understanding that in that moment, in that time, I really knew what the value of Christmas time was. Every time the holidays were to come along, I would do everything I can to be there for my family and to reach out to those, especially those who are in difficult circumstances, telling them that there's always going to be unity, that people are going to come together and get to spend time with each other, precious time that I think perhaps for many of us, we felt that it might have been taken for granted before this pandemic. I just want to reflect on some of the Christmases also that George Washington, the man whom I think all of you are familiar with at this point, I think is something to note. I mentioned how Christmases are very different, but the traditional values still remain the same. For President Washington, his Christmases ranged from spending a brutal winter with his Continental Army in the midst of the American Revolution, down to a peaceful Christmas just with Martha, or a Christmas dinner in Philadelphia with Robert Morris, one of the principal architects of the American financial system. And while each Christmas was different, I think President Washington understood the value of Christmas, especially in those later years. In later years of his life, he gave a few days of Christmas break for his slaves. As you know, he was a slave owner, but I think over time he understood the impact of family and that impact of spending time with one another. And throughout our conversations over the last several episodes, we've touched upon this idea of bridging divides. One of our pillars is civility, is fostering an environment where it's not just about building one bridge, but building multiple bridges, and not just building them, but maintaining them. Maintaining an environment where people can actively express their values and share those unifying values because of the time that we've spent together. And just to think about the Christmas holiday, I won't go too much into detail about specifically what I did. I mean, it was a lot of just family time for me this past Christmas. But I thought I would end this episode and our 2020 content with this. Just thinking about those times when I was little, thinking about those times when I would wake up early in the morning, sometimes too excited, looking out for whether or not Santa ate the cookies and drank the milk the previous night. Waking up to see all the presents, all that, thinking also at that time about how it all got to that day, to that momentous Christmas day. Weeks before we would decorate the Christmas tree, I would sit on the floor with the decorations on our Christmas tree that we pull out from the storage. We make Christmas decorations. We have the lights. We have some of these incredible Santa sculptures, I guess you could say. I don't know where those came from, but somehow they end up in storage every year for us to pull out. I also love the atmosphere of food. I mean, my mother shared a little bit about the importance of food and the previous episode about some of the dishes that she used to have during the holiday season back in Taiwan. And I think for the food in the holiday season, Christmas cookies or any of those sorts, I think are perfect. I can only begin to imagine and very close actually eat real cookies, which I actually did around Christmas time. That amazing taste, the immense feeling when you're sitting next to a fireplace and you drink hot cocoa, you interact with your friends and family, either remotely or in person, and you just welcome their presence. You welcome that wintry spirit and that season, that time of the year, the most wonderful time of the year, as the song goes. I love the holiday season, as you can probably tell. I love how there's, even with different circumstances, even as everyone around me, including myself, is growing, is developing every year. I feel like every year is another stepping stone in life. Even despite the changes, there's still a lot that remains the same. I mean, I just feel like every time the holidays come around, I get to see Santa again. I get to see the little plush reindeer that we used to have, and the Christmas lights that light up the house. So many beautiful things about the holidays. And most importantly, it's about the time I spend with family, and to know that I still have them and that we still have each other, and that love, that bond will never go away. It will remain strong regardless of the circumstances. And I hope to all of you, as we wrap up 2020 and heading into the new year, that you keep those bonds, that you keep those forces that rejuvenate you, that keep you going and keep you as the person whom you are today. And that support system, something we mentioned last week, a support system that keeps you where you are, but not only keeps you where you are, but keeps you moving forward. Those are the things that we cherish. So thank you all for joining me in this final episode of 2020. I'm going to surprise all of you by not telling you what is going to happen over the next week or so. I've got a surprise for all of you to start 2021. And I'm really, really grateful for all of you. To all of you listeners out there, to the Friends and Fellow Citizens community, a big thank you. I wish you all a happy rest of your holidays and a happy new year. And I'll see you next week and next year for another episode of Friends and Fellow Citizens. Take care, and so long.